We're ready to start the Quilts First for May.
Yeah, it's already May. We're
Yes.
full on spring here in Chicago.
And we're going to be talking about so much today, but specifically, we'll be going into a lot of details about our new Shoreline Quiltalong, which is not a mystery, but I think it's going to be, we'll be showing you what that looks like. And hi, Kate.
People are filtering in.
Yes.
Great.
So we'll get into all of those details.
Yeah, we'll let people filter in and then give you a little roadmap for the afternoon.
Exactly.
For the hour.
So the first thing, Joe, though, just to talk about is a little bit of housekeeping, which is if you've ordered an LTD bundle this week, the fabric shipment was delayed a little bit. That's coming today.
Probably in an hour.
We hope we're not in the middle of this. If so, you're going to hear a lot of barking and doorbells and stuff. But the rest of the LTD bundles, the fabrics we need to make the bundles, are coming today. And also we'll be closed for just a couple of days next week to do some life maintenance. But
welcome to May.
Yes, exactly. And so the first thing to tell you about is we have a new spring bundle on our website made with different fabrics from previous lines of ours. And hi, Dawn. Hello from Chicago. Yes, we're both having a rainy day, aren't we? But anyway, this this bundle,
And there's a reason we're showing you this now. These are going to be in a limited
Yes, you can
number.
see these work really beautifully together.
So that's
Debbie.
the LTD bundle.
Yes, that's the LTD
And
bundle.
we're going to talk
That's the
about
spring bundle.
how these work together in an upcoming event we're about to release.
Exactly. So this is 10 fat quarters for $42. We have just, a handful in inventory right now. Well, we can make some more if people really want them, but we're going to be using this with LTD in the Shoreline Quiltalong we'll be talking about today.
Yeah.
But, and hello, Canada. We still love you, Canada. Okay. Then you want to talk about the sweet tooth submissions?
Yeah, so for those of you who participated in the Sweet Tooth Quiltalong, we told you there'd be a virtual exhibition, as we always do after our Quiltalongs. Well, the submissions are now open, so participants can go to the Bakehouse, the secret webpage. If you scroll down, the button is now live where you can upload a submission. So, as always, take the best photo you can of your pieced and quilted top.
One photo
One
each.
photo of each, and upload that. Whatever your file name is generally becomes the caption, although some upload systems occasionally kind of garble that and it just becomes a random number. But we really always look forward to your submissions because
it inspires so many people.
It's really inspirational. You get to see how a background color, how changing the recipes, how every detail really affects the overall quilt. Plus the sizes. I mean,
Yeah.
I love seeing the queens.
Yeah, the big ones.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I love seeing the big ones too.
Yeah.
So can you, there was some issue with the country.
Oh, it was a minor, it's all resolved.
No, but we've had, you got rid of that.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know you had that one person, but I've had a bunch of people ask me about that. So that should be easy to do. And so look on the Bakehouse for the link to that.
Yes, that button is now live.
Yes.
And we'll be putting making the exhibition itself live in, I'm going to say, I think I put May 20th, which gives people time to submit things.
But don't worry, if you haven't quilted yours yet, don't worry about it because Bill updates periodically and there's no hurry with it, but we want to just be able, for those who have completed it and are ready to go.
Right. I try to update all the exhibitions roughly at the end of the month or when I have a chunk of free time. And I never have free time. That's why. So, but if you want to go back to any of the previous exhibitions, I think I updated every single one last week. There were
Lots of new submissions.
lots of new submissions, and in general, the newer submissions appear at the bottom of the exhibition. So scroll down to get all the way to the bottom.
Yeah. So, because there are people who are just starting New Day or Secret
oh my
Agent
gosh, yes.
or, summer camp or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're going to talk about Shoreline.
This is the big news.
This is the new, well, we told them last,
I know,
when we did the live unboxing, we told them. So we're going to do a different sort of quilt-along beginning on June 5th. And it's not a mystery quilt-along, and it's going to be structured a little bit differently. There will be 4 installments, and we're going to show you the main. I'm going to call it kind of the main layout, but the whole goal of this quilt-along is to help coach those of you who are interested in all the different ways that you can customize a quilt, and different layouts, sorry about the thunder you might hear behind us. There's a storm coming through.
As long as the power stays on.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna coach you through how to customize a quilt using layout and fabric combinations and size adjustments and that kind of thing. Yeah. So you want to...
Well, I would say in the mystery quilt-alongs, you learn a lot about color and design by doing. With this non-mystery quilt-along, it's very explicit. We'll be saying, okay, here is a section where we're talking about proportion or value, or here we're going to be giving you new techniques, tips, ways of working that you may not have done before. So it's the breaking it into 4 different installments, we hope will kind of slow everyone down so you can really percolate on the discussion and learn to see your work in different ways.
So we're not going to give you all of the measurements and all of the steps and all of that at the beginning, because Bill and I were talking about this, and the reason it's gonna be progressive disclosure. So each week there will be a new section of the quilt, even though you'll be able to see the final layout.
And we're going to show you layout in just a moment,
and all the different options. But the thing that we're trying to avoid is sometimes we have in a quilt-along one person who's super fast, and they, within 48 hours, it seems like they finished the quilt and they posted it. And then for other people then start to feel behind and rushed. And what we're trying to do is get you to think about how we want you to see all of the choices you have. And if you see a completed quilt top, then we start seeing the posts of like, oh, I'm so behind. And
you're not.
And you're not. So we're just going to do step by step each week. There'll be a new part of the pattern, and we'll be addressing like every little detail in how to successfully complete the quilt. So you'll be able to see on the product description for the Shoreline Quiltalong on our website, there's a schedule and all of the different points we'll be talking about each week. So it's really different than the mystery quilts. But do you want to start showing
I think
options?
What would help, let's get to it. This is going to be a quilt that's offered in 3 sizes: baby or wall hanging size, a napping quilt, and a queen size quilt. So Weeks and
stash friendly also. We'll talk about that
later. Totally
later.
Stash friendly. As Weeks said earlier, we're going to be using some of our new 2025 LTD fabrics and
plus the
spring bundle, and we're going to actually dive into our stash to supplement everything. But this is if you have a significant stash, this is a quilt that you probably don't have to buy any new fabrics for. But so I'm going to start with holding these, trying to get that square. It's always hard. This is the Shoreline quilt. This is a napping size. So this is about 54 by 76 inches, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to interject and say, don't freak out about the curves.
At all.
At all. We're going to take you step by step through them. It is really a manageable project for people who are new to piecing curves. And this is your opportunity to have somebody coach you through how to make a quilt like this step by step so you can be successful. We've spent a lot of time thinking about this and planning this. So
it's actually,
don't freak out at the idea.
It's actually amazingly satisfying.
No, there's you don't have to match points. No. It's really flexible. Sign me up.
Okay, great. So this part of what makes it so incredibly fun is the stash friendliness of it. If I go in closer, you can see that there are these kind of wavy horizontal bands. But to kind of cut to the chase, you'll be sewing wide bands, just big yardage that are rectangles, and then cutting this gentle wave in each one and then sewing the bands together.
But you can cut in. I'll be using scissors for this because
for the curves.
Yeah, for the curves. So this is like a really different technique. You can use a rotary cutter, you can use scissors. I like the control when you're cutting yardage like this of scissors. And if you're new to there's a template, there's one template. And if you're new to templates, we're going to show you, start to finish, every little step of how to pin, how to make the template, everything. So.
And it's a template that you can print out on computer paper. Some people may want to transfer it to template plastic. You actually, you may or may not want to, totally up to you. You can use just plain paper. It's going to be simpler than it looks at first. The curve is so gentle that you're not fighting bias.
No notching.
There's no notching. And the other thing is all those little strips that make up the horizontal bands start out as 10-inch strips, anywhere from 1.5 to about 2 3/4 inches wide. So there are so many strips. There are, I can't remember, on the napping quilt, there are probably 40 different fabrics in the band.
So this is so fun for those of you who
gosh.
have the minimum scrap size you're going to need is 1.5 by 10 inches.
Yeah.
So
everything needs to be at least 10 inches long.
But we're going to help you organize your palettes and everything. But there's so many. I want to, before we we're so excited that we want to show you all the different ways, or some of the different ways.
Yeah, just a few.
That you can alter, like different layouts.
So you can customize this. So the thing that's really important is, as you look at this quilt right now, notice how the bands alternate light, medium, or light, dark. The key to this quilt is having some contrast between the different bands so that you see the curves. So if all these bands were made of the exact same fabrics, you wouldn't see the curves. You wouldn't see that. So
hold on for 1 second. Donna says stash friendly and not precise piecing. I'm going to just, comment that because it's curves, you will want to be precise with your seam allowance and your cutting. That is one area where you're going to be precise, but you won't have to match points beyond just making sure that your curve is very accurate.
Yes.
Because you want this quilt to lie flat. So it isn't total mayhem, but it also isn't like sweet tooth, where you really had to have, there was no wiggle room.
And if you could hold that 1 week, please.
So is this sweet tooth leftovers friendly? Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. And so here is, just a different scale. This is how the queen would come out. It's roughly 100 by 99, but you can imagine that, with the queen size that it would be easy to extend it or cut it a little smaller.
Yeah.
And then, actually, just a moment, I want to show you the one other size. And so these aren't all to scale, but that's the napping. Weeks has the napping. This is the wall hanging size, which I think is
baby
39 by 46, if I remember correctly. So basically, the concept is the same. The bands will end up being the same height, but depending on how many and how wide you make them, the quilt's a different size.
But you could also make those bands taller if you wanted. Or,
Yeah.
This is where we're trying to give you the opportunity to learn how a designer thinks and how a designer looks at proportion and makes adjustments.
Exactly. Okay. So that's upside down. So Weeks has, this is the one variation we're going to make.
With the lighter and darker values.
To give you ideas of how different this could be, if you have an amazing stash of tone-on-tones, these two are the exact same quilt. It's just, instead of having
so different
two, we're making an ombre. In this case, you could make an ombre with all your yellows, your oranges, your red oranges, your violets.
White to black.
So here, can I hand you that?
He's trying to cover me up.
Then, if you love two-color quilts, like you could have a navy or black and blue quilt. I could imagine this being just stunning in a gray and a black, or in two different tones of green.
Or if you're one of those people who's super into your local college football team or whatever, college colors, the red and white in Wisconsin, I always think about. You could do a variation of a two-color quilt with this pattern also.
And then, since it's all about variations, you can look at those little strips and imagine if you did this exact same quilt, but occasionally introduced a little sliver of a violet or a green or a light blue. You could have accents throughout the quilt. And in the same way, you don't have to call these all. And these images are all on our website on the Shoreline product if you go to the Quiltalongs.
Yeah, you can see these on the website.
So here's another example. You could have all of the bands almost the same width, but make this one little sliver that just snakes through there in a vivid lime green or
you
a
can
red.
have that on every band too.
Exactly.
So this is why we want to take 4 weeks to do this, rather than just giving you a pattern and say, okay, so A to B.
Exactly.
Because we want to show you how to make adjustments. Because somebody had said they wanted like a design along, and
this is a little bit of that.
This is got a little bit of this, but it's still within a structure of a pattern. So thank you. It does look 3D, which is why we think it's such a cool quilt.
And I know that we have quilters from all over the world, so I always want to acknowledge that the template prints out perfectly on US letter size, or if you're using metric A4 paper, which is the standard.
Which is like, bravo, Bill, for being inclusive.
Well, I do that on every single pattern I make, but I always want to mention it. So here's another example where we're taking the wide bands and having them slivers of fabric, but using a solid background fabric in a lesser proportion, in this case, kind of an espresso brown. And so, this is another option. Not every band has to be pieced. And what's really cool is the template is the curve. So you can overlay it on top of any height strip.
And you can just photocopy
Or
print
just
out.
print out as many as...
Well, I'm just saying, like, if they don't have a printer or something like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
You can, you'll be able to make a large template for the entire row with this, by taping together a series of pieces of a printout that we'll give you.
Basically, the template will be a curve, and you cut out a bunch, like 7 of them, depending on the size, and you tape them together.
Right.
So you can begin to see, thanks to her skills in holding, that the curve defines everything, and the alternating bands give the edge that let you see that curve. So we're going to put...
It's all about contrast.
It's all about contrast. We always say it's all about edge.
Yeah.
So
the whole goal of this thing is to take your time and think about what you want to make. And if you want to use the fabrics we're doing because you want to focus on like the curves and the templates, that's fine. We'll have the spring bundle available, and you can use the LTD bundle with it, and you'll be, totally set. If you want to use the, actually, can you hold this, please? If you want to use the LTD bundle with the watercolors behind us, you can see that will work also. So,
and if you want to take, if I can show you in here, one thing I did here is this version of the baby quilt takes the LTD bundle and separates the reds and oranges from the blue, greens, and purples. And using just that bundle, you can make this smaller version. So
this wall hanging, for those of you who purchased the LTD bundle when it came out, if you wanted to make the wall hanging with no additional fabric, you could make either of these quilts.
Yes, and Pam was asking, is the spring bundle the lights? Yes, in this case, that is the lights.
And actually, there are a couple of lights within the LTD bundle
that will go into the light pile.
But they're similar values as this.
And in the first installment of the Quiltalong, we'll talk so much more about fabric choices and how this works. In addition, we're putting together a preview video for this entire Quiltalong that will come out on May 15th. And that will talk more about fabric selection. And again, the goal is to end up with some clear distinction between the bands, and the possibilities are...
But even there can be from, where's that one?
I think
UPS may be here.
Yes. I will be right back.
Take care of that, Mike. But you can also add interesting plays of color and contrast within the bands. So all of these, we're going to be talking a lot about color and contrast and how to have a scrappy, cohesive quilt that uses as many different fabrics as you want. Now, hello, Lucky. Yes, Lucky always alerts us when the UPS arrives. The one thing I will tell you about this Quiltalong is that this is not a good opportunity for novelty prints, for example. Now, I think you could use like feed sack prints or really small motifs, but if you've got a whole bunch of Disney princess frozen fabrics or something like that, this doesn't work as well because these strips are going to be thin and it's going to cut things up. We generally like to, there's always questions about, can I use solids with the prints? And, we talk always about the role of the fabric, and you're going to want solids just end up looking like a whole when they're next to prints or batiks or yarn dyes. And so what we would recommend is if you have a bunch of solids and you have a bunch of prints, you could put them in different rows, but I wouldn't put them in the same row because the solids will look empty. So, solids behave differently than prints, batiks, yarn dyes, which can all be mixed in any of the rows interchangeably. But if you want to use solids, then we'd suggest that you have, that you confine them, all of the solids to one row, or even they could be these contrasting things, but they just don't behave in a quilt the same way that multicolored quilts, even tone on tone. And when we're talking solids, we're referring to literally solids that have not tone on tones, not marble prints or low contrast prints that have fabrics that have no pattern whatsoever.
Okay,
So,
and we have lots more fabric.
Yes,
This is how you know it's a live stream.
Exactly. Oh, did it just arrive?
Oh, yes.
Oh, just
We have bolts and bolts and bolts.
you plan and you plan. So, but at least that means that we can finish the LTD bundles that people are waiting for and get those out today or tomorrow morning. So,
so I'm really excited about this quilt-along because, with the mystery quilt-alongs, they're different because they have a narrative. This doesn't have a narrative. And it's a different kind of community. This will be so much more about individual exploration. And I think that the Facebook community will be
helpful,
really rich with this.
And inspiring. Yeah.
And we spend a long time designing these quilts because we want to have enough choices that you can customize it and feel like it's really your unique quilt, but not so many that it becomes a free-for-all and there's no commonality.
Or that you don't really understand what you can change and what you can't.
Yeah,
without
in
losing
design,
the cohesiveness of the quilt.
Having kind of some fixed parameters and working within constraints really frees you up to, I think, often be more creative within those constraints.
So you'll see on the product description that at some point there's going to be a live Q&A for participants, and we did not determine a specific date for that yet because we're trying to figure out when people are going to want to have that. My guess is that they're going to want to do it either right after the first installment or right before the first installment.
My guess is right after, where they'll want a little help sorting.
Yeah. So at some point there will be a live Q&A, but we're gonna want to hear your feedback on when that would be most helpful to have that, so we can schedule that. The other thing is I wanted to talk a little bit about the fourth installment that you're going to see, because we haven't done this before to the extent that I want to do it with this particular quilt, but I really want to have a thorough discussion about batting, binding, the label we're going to provide, thread selection, quilting options, because this isn't a mystery quilt and there isn't a big reveal. I want to use that fourth one to talk about finishing and how even just the density of the stitching can change how the quilt feels, how different battings will change how the quilt feels, thread selection because it's a multicolored quilt, and to really spend more time than we normally do discussing finishing your quilt.
We can be more intentional because we're not trying to keep any secrets.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the really fun things about a mystery quilt is the surprise. One of the challenges, though, is you can't make as many plans or intentional decisions when you don't know what's happening at the outcome.
Right.
Here, because you'll see right away, well, you've already seen options for the quilts, and then you'll come up with the direction for yours. You'll be able week by week to make certain changes or fine-tune things from the fabric selection to how you sew it.
And we'll be able to give you feedback on that.
Yeah.
Kathy's asking, will the Quiltalong be recorded?
Yes.
Yes. So what we're going to do is what we've done in previous Quiltalongs, which is to have a set of instructions that you'll download and print out for each installment, and then a corresponding pre-recorded video that you can watch as many times as you want. And all of that will be available for at least 6 months after your purchase date. So if you decide that your summer looks busy and you want to tackle this next November, then for 6 months after, until May of next year, you'd at least you'd have access to all the videos and all of the instructions. We also will add that live Q&A whenever that happens during June. We'll add that as a video to the Beach House portal, so you can watch that later also.
Yeah, and as always, we like to have fun, so there will be a Spotify Summer Nights playlist in June that will come out.
The question and answer session. Yes, that's what I was referring to. Oh, the question and answer session will be live.
But also recorded.
Live and recorded. So let's just say people decide that they'd like it before it starts, because they want help with fabric selection or whatever. Then let's say we have it on June 3rd or something like that. Then after June 3rd, we would place that recorded, the recording of the live Q&A section on the portal so you can access it later. Does that help?
Everything that we do live, we try to record and have available later that day or the next day.
But if it's part of a quilt along, we usually don't just put it on our. It's on the portal. It's a private video.
Yes.
These live streams for Quilts First, where we sometimes answer questions about quilt-alongs as well, are always on our YouTube channel. But the videos that are specific to a quilt-along are usually on the private portal that's part of the quilt-along.
So
please repeat the May date for more info. So May 15th, we'll have a preview video that will be open to the public for anybody who is not certain whether they want to join the Quilt-along, and we'll explain a little bit more in detail. And usually we show fabric, like palette options and that kind of thing.
Talk a little more about specific fabric and yardage requirements. They're already, the general requirements for the yardage are listed on our website for the Shoreline Quiltalong. One thing
Just one second.
Oh.
Sharon says she feels very heard. She asked for a non-mystery with curves and we delivered.
It's all on you.
We do.
Thank you for speaking up.
You were not alone. There were a lot of people who asked for a stash-friendly non-mystery quilt-along. And especially given the whole tariff situation and, all of that, this seems like a perfect time to do a stash-friendly non-mystery quilt, because I think the mystery and the curves can sometimes throw people, and there'll be a lot of curves, but I think this is a really good time to be able to just have something different that's not just a variation of things we've done before.
But one of the other nice things, because this is a manageable curve, once you do it once, you're repeating the same technique over and over, and
you'll get very
comfortable with it. The other thing, I thought I would take just a second to talk about requirements. If, like us, you want to make the napping quilt, each of these bands uses just over half a yard of fabrics. So this is
this size. For
the napping size. Yeah. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we called it 6 yards to be safe. But if for instance, you are trying to, I have to go through all my, if you're interested in trying something like the ombre quilt, you need about a little over half a yard of each cue for each row. And I don't have that number calculated yet for the queen or the small size, but it's kind of a manageable amount.
It's about half. It's about half of the queen.
When we have the longer video, we'll explain why it's not precise, because there is an improvisational nature to how wide each strip is cut, and therefore how much of your fabric goes in the seam allowance.
And Nancy says, besides, there's enough mystery in our lives just now. Amen.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of mystery, and
yes,
we just thought it would be nice to do something kind of a little slow and calm, and where people can really take their time and learn something new that's a little bit harder when you have a mystery narrative that you get kind of caught up in. So I think that this will be a nice, relaxing way to learn something new, to use fabrics you already have, or to use fabrics that we're using in conjunction with your stash. I think this is the right time for this particular quilt-along.
I hope it will be a calming quilt-along. I personally really enjoy production sewing of strips to make yardage.
The mindlessness of sewing yardage is so calming.
It is, and the beauty of taking your stash or whatever fabric you're working with and seeing it transform into this really kind of maximalist striped fabric is, I don't know, I like that kind of transformation.
So the registration, if this sounds like something you want to do, the registration is already live on our website. If you're looking for more information about it, the product description is
it's very
long and very thorough. So read the whole thing. You'll need to have a printer to print out the templates and the instructions
when they're available.
When they're available, which will be the first. We're doing this summer nights. We're doing the releases in the evenings.
Yeah, so it's going to be different.
Well, so because a lot of people are gone on the weekends in the summer, so we thought we'll have it on a Thursday night. You'll be able at 7 p.m. Central Time. The new instructions will be live, and we can be active on the Facebook group that at that time if you have questions about it. But rather than Fridays at noon, we decided to do Thursdays at 7 for just the summer at least.
Yes. And so like previous quilt-alongs, when you purchase the quilt-along, you'll immediately be sent a link to download the Shoreline Guide, which is going to be a 2-page PDF that you need to print out and hang on to. That gives you access to the secret page where we post everything. So the way it works, if you've done a previous quilt-along with us, is very similar. It's just not a mystery.
You do not need links. You will not be receiving additional emails. You'll download and print out this one page that has the address to the portal, and that's the only link you'll need for the entire time. So, and check your downloads if you don't see it, because we can always see if somebody's downloaded things. Then there'll be people who I don't see it, and I'll say you've downloaded it 14 times. I know it's on your device. You just need to find it. Yeah. And your local library is excellent for helping you figure out where your downloads are if you're not sure on a particular device. So what questions do you have for us about any of this?
Yeah, or does anyone have immediate ideas of colors they want to use or something?
Or when they might like to have that live Q&A if you think
I think they don't know enough yet.
Well,
maybe.
They might based on this, but we think it's going to be a really fun and different experience than we've had before, and we can't wait to see what you think. So let's see. is there anything else we need to discuss, or are we?
I think we're in pretty good
We're in pretty good shape and need to go cut fabric.
Yeah, so we'll be cutting, and so we will, with this quilt along, we'll be doing it kind of a little bit of cooking show style. There will be times that we have parts of it prepared ahead of time, parts where we walk you through as we're doing it. It will be a real mix, but in the end, we'll all have quilts that kind of are related by curves.
Yeah. Kathy wants to know whether the transparency line will work well or if we need the pastel added. This is where you're going to make your own choices. When you say the transparency line, I'm assuming you mean the original transparency line, maybe, which is similar in value. You can see, actually, you know what? You can see behind Bill. No, this is the transparency line. And some of it, because it's meant for something else, the darker ones, if you divide it up, the darker ones and the lighter ones.
Or divide it up like reds and blues and greens.
Right. You might think about doing it this way. But if you decide to use the transparency fabrics, you're going to need some kind of contrast, whether it's hue, where you're going to divide up the reds and pinks and the blues and greens and purples, or value. So you're going to need some kind of contrast between those bands, and it can be hue, value, or saturation for the most part. Those are the biggies.
And I'm looking at Donna's comment. Since it's called Shoreline, she's thinking of alternating
great idea.
Water and sand.
Yeah.
And I actually think with those thin strips, if you have a collection of off-whites or tans, that could be really gentle and beautiful. Also,
neutrals, any kind of neutrals versus brights, that would be another option.
And the way that the water goes from blues to greens to murky, you could really bring in probably a wider variety than you might think of colors there, or keep it calming aqua. But I like that. And I think, May's question, would it work with all solids? It
Absolutely.
would work beautifully with solids.
Again, it's going to be all about those contrast between the bands, but there's so many ways to get there. And that's the part that we feel like we can really help you with, because there are, if you wanted to do all solids, you could divide them up by hue. You could divide, like where you're having like greens and purple bands, for example, or you could do the value, which is what we're going to be doing, or you could have some really muted fabrics with some brighter fabrics. There are really going to be so many options for this.
There are, and it can go from kind of flamboyant and bright to very subdued and gentle.
Or it can be an ombre, like Bill showed.
Yeah, this is kind of a loud ombre, but it could also be a very pastel or gentle ombre, depending on what you have, what fabrics you have to work with. I think in general, when you're looking at a strip, I would say you want at least a half dozen different fabrics, but the more you have, the more rich depth and variety you'll have. But it is absolutely an opportunity to kind of, for the more is more, I think.
Yeah, and especially for those of you, I'm even thinking beyond that contrast. For those of you who may have like a ton of K-facet fabrics, for example, that he tends to have two main colorways that he uses a lot, the pinks and oranges, and then the blues and greens and purples. And that is basically, where's that one?
Where's it?
That's kind of this palette right here, and his fabrics tend to run into each other.
But that might work with this.
But it might work fine, because as long as you've got contrast between the bands, if there isn't a ton of contrast within the horizontal bands, it's still going to read.
Yeah, you could do it if you had some kind of loud cave facet prints, upside down. You could do it like this, alternating with a solid espresso, kind of like with our bold proposition quilt, which was in Modern Quilts Illustrated
12 on the cover.
On the cover, we mixed cave prints with a solid brown, and I think that's another approach. So the one thing, again, we'll talk more about this in the preview video on May 15th. And one of the reasons we want to kind of get you thinking is, so if you do have additional questions, we can answer those at the beginning of June. But also, it helps us, when we see what you're doing, it helps us think of how to prepare.
But this is an example for, for those of you who have maybe a ton of the Australian Aboriginal prints,
beautiful,
that are really loud, or African wax prints or something like that. This combination where you've got really loud, really tons of pattern and pattern and pattern, but interspersed with a calming solid in between them, that would also be a good way to frame this. So this is going to be a really different sort of palette. You're going to have so much freedom for how to combine fabrics. That the only thing I talked about earlier when you were dealing with the UPS was that the novelty prints, like Disney princesses and stuff, won't work so well because the strips are narrow and you don't want to be cutting heads off of snowmen and stuff like that.
But in general, I do want to reiterate one thing, which is we're giving fabric requirements based on kind of a certain standard that we're doing. And if you change things to have, for instance, thinner strips, we can talk about approximate quantities, but it will vary from person to person because of the customization. So if in doubt, err on the side of having a little extra fabric.
Or a lot of extra
fabric. And I think one of the things that if you've never worked with so many thin strips, a lot goes into the seam allowances, because
that's why you need so much fabric.
When you have a finished strip that's, let's say, an inch or an inch and a half, 30 to 50% of that is in the seam allowance. And when you have a quilt like this, it's always amazing how much more weight there is to the pieced top. Often double the weight. I mean, I love the feel
me too.
of it.
It's heavy.
They drape beautifully.
And that's why I want to talk about batting, because this is going to be a heavier quilt. And so you might want to think about using a lighter batting than you normally do, like a bamboo batting or the Quilter's Dream thin.
It's not outrageously heavy. I mean, it's still fabric. It's going to be
heavier, especially if it's like a queen quilt or something. So, there are, and also we'll have to, how you press seams is
we will have to discuss.
Yeah, we're going to have to get into that. So,
and I'll also be very, I like to be very transparent about things. The queen, you'll be working with some very long bands, and we'll give you strategies for actually all of these working with bands. Because
and what happens when you cut them?
When you cut them and as you sew them, that's why this is a non-mystery quilt along, because we want to be able to talk about each of these points so that you're really successful, so that you finish this quilt with a new understanding of how you can work on other quilts as well.
And often also just, tips that you might not have ever used before for when you have stripped yardage like this, that then you're trying to cut a seam on, and you don't want them to come apart when you start cutting that curve. So we've got a whole bunch of tips for how to successfully do this, but we don't want you to race through it and make mistakes.
I'm kind of chuckling to myself because we've just done a couple of very elaborate mystery quilts where the pattern ended up being between 50 and 90 pages. And the pattern is amazingly simple.
But the
technique
fabric selection
and the
and all that.
selection is complex. So you won't need a ream of paper for this,
Yeah.
for the pattern.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking forward to spending some time today just staring at my fabric stash for ideas.
Great.
Oh, good. It'll good.
And one thing you can do, even before we have the preview video, you can start just making little piles and looking
Yeah.
at piles next to each other and seeing, are they different enough to make contrasting bands?
Nancy says she wants to see all the little elves you must have working in your workshop. Lucky, I think that's you. we have one little elf who helps us in our workshop, our studio, but pretty much we do everything else, and that's why
busy.
but that's also why we're not on the road teaching, and we're trying to reach more people who otherwise we wouldn't be able to see in more parts of the world. So,
and also, I think because we're so hands-on, it puts us very much in tune with these quilt-alongs. We're so aware of what you want, what you're buying, what you tell us you want to learn, and I think we're quite in tune that way.
So, Fred wants to know if she used silk ties, and you have so many. So, if you decide to use silk ties, learn from my mistake, which is you'll want to stabilize them. So, the what is the name of the
silky,
the featherweight? What is the name of that interfacing brand?
Pellon.
The Pellon featherweight interfacing, fusible interfacing.
One-sided fusible. Yes.
One-sided is you will want to fuse every one of those ties, and then
then they'd be beautiful.
Then they'd be beautiful, exactly.
We made a tie. We were given salesman samples from ties that we weren't taking ties apart. We actually had the salesman samples of fabric, and we did a quilt without interfacing, and
it was a nightmare.
It was
exhausting.
Beautiful. But yes, you want to interface.
Ada says she misunderstood and thought that the Quiltalong was using the on-the-spot pattern. The on-the-spot pattern, can you grab that? Oh. That is our it's temporarily free to use promotional pattern for this line. So this does not need a Quiltalong.
No, this is the
very straightforward.
We have a kit on our site, or you can go to the Benartech site just to get the pattern.
Exactly.
We actually we're making it right now, so we'll have probably next time we see you, we'll have the quilt. Yeah. But I'll put that right here.
Yeah, but that's...
So sorry there was any misunderstanding, but that is a
sew A to B quilt.
Yeah, this is a very straightforward pattern. Once again, contrast is important for those X's. You do need to pick a fabric that is clearly contrasting. But
yes.
I'm so glad, Jackie, you missed the first few minutes. Well, we'll have this recorded. I usually get it up on our YouTube channel within a few hours.
Yeah. So. Okay, so
We've got lots to do.
Lots to do, and we look forward to talking to those of you who are going to participate in this, and I think it's going to be a really fun, relaxing, but great learning opportunity. To expand your skills, and that's always what we're interested in helping you with. So.
And again, the sharing, if you have thoughts about this, you can already share your ideas on the Facebook group.
And your palettes,
I'm really glad that I saw Elizabeth's comment about Shape Flex, which is an all cotton woven fusible that's not featherweight but lightweight. Wonderful. I've never used that. Yeah. That's good to know of. And again, you can do this entirely from your stash, perhaps. We're going to be using our newer fabrics, whatever works for you. We want you to be working with fabrics you love and making a quilt you love.
And Debbie's right in saying that you can absolutely use the 2025 LTD line in this Quiltalong. That's what we'll be doing.
Yes.
So we'll be using we
won't be using these.
But we'll be using the remainders plus, can you hold that? Plus this spring bundle. This will be our light bundle, and these will be our darks. Although I think a couple of these may go in the light
They
pile.
might go there in one dark. Yeah, we'll just kind of
So we're
audition.
going to be dividing up between these two bundles. And
using our stash as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Because as I said earlier, I think this is a more is more. So even if we already have, say, 20 or 18 darks, if we can add another 5 or 10 to that.
Because there's so many seams.
And the other thing is, I think when you're making striped yardage, there's always going to be there might be one or two fabrics to get your attention a little bit more. And if you can disperse them evenly, it works well. So.
Exactly. Okay, so we will see, we'll have the preview video up May 15th, and that will be on our YouTube channel. And we'll post links to that in both the main Modern Quilt Studio page as well as the Patterns and Fabrics group on our Facebook page. And then we'll start on June 5th, the first installment, and the video will be on our on the portal.
And the portal will be called the Beach House.
Yes.
So if you
you'll
sign
get the
up,
code to that once you've registered.
Once you've registered,
and it's $30 for
the
whole thing. Yeah.
For the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's it.
Jelly rolls, yes.
Kay asked jelly rolls. That actually would work
Beautifully.
especially if you supplement. In general, the pattern is going to call for strips that are between 1.5 and 2 3/4 inches wide. But if you just go to 2.5, it'll work fine.
Dawn's already signed up.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I feel like we need to give some sort of prize to the first person who signs up.
Yeah. So jelly rolls, I can't believe I hadn't thought of that. So if you want some strips to be slightly wider, you could use some things that are a bit wider than the jelly roll, but we're going to talk about that in the fabric selection video as well. But jelly roll, because we don't use jelly rolls, I don't think about them, but
I forget about them.
Yeah.
The other thing to let you know about is if you're placing an order for merchandise on the website, we still have some leftover stickers from Sweet Tooth and Lighthouse Inn. And if you would like any of those stickers, just put them in your order.
Leave a note.
If you're ordering if you're just ordering digital stuff, I don't want to have to mail that to you. But if you're ordering fabric and you want a couple of little stickers, I'm happy to throw that in.
But just tell us.
In addition to the mints, usually.
We keep adding mints to packages. So.
Above a certain, if it's all just magazines, then we can't.
They get crushed.
Yeah. So anyway. All right.
Thank you all. It's always a pleasure to hear what your ideas
look at the sun
are.
is out.
And the sun's
Amazing.
coming out. So thanks for joining us again. We'll get this up on YouTube. And
looks like a fun summer.
Yeah, it looks like a shoreline summer.
Exactly.
So take care, everyone.